everyone, welcome to the last class of our cabled hat project. You should be down to 12 stitches remaining on your needle, and yeah, I'm going to show you how to draw the stitches up and how to sew the back seam. For how much yarn to leave now that we're at the end for sewing and whatnot, I usually leave about 4 times the length of my seam. Just sort of for peace of mind that I've got enough. You can cut your yarn, and you're going to need a wool needle that looks like this for sewing and finishing everything up. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to thread our wool needle, and we are going to thread it through our remaining 12 stitches. So I've got my yarn through my needle, and I am just going to start by going right through one stitch at a time and sliding them off the needle and on to my wool needle, just like this. If you don't want a ridge of bumps facing at the top of your hat, you could do your last row of the pattern purl 2 together across rather than knit 2 together across for a smooth top. I'm actually not sure. I think I don't know if I made a mistake on the pattern or whether I just decided that I wanted the ridges showing. I can't remember. But anyways, it doesn't matter. It all blends in at the top. And so I've pulled those stitches through, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to loop my my needle back into where I started, so that we are going to draw everything into a circle. I'm just going to go right back where I was and right through the stitches again, which is going to suck everything into a nice tidy circle, and all the way through, and then over right at the very end I'm going to go through that first stitch one more time just to sort of cinch everything closed. Okay, so now we've got a nice tidy top, and it's nice and tight. I've drawn it up nice and tight. Now for sewing, now I'm left-handed, so if you're not left-handed, you are going to you're going to sort of do the opposite of what I'm doing here, but the concept is the same. When I'm sewing something like this, I always take my needle and I go down through the stitches on one side of my work and up through the stitches on the other side of my work. So for me, I'm going down through the stitches on my left and up on my right. If you're right-handed, you would probably find it easier to go down through the stitches on the right side of or the right sort of half of your seam, and up through the left side of your seam. Okay, so what I do, I often find people tend to over sew when they're sewing. They get really panicky about not doing enough stitches, so they tend to go through every loop that they can. I find that it's actually more beneficial to go actually only through every second row of stitches, and I'm going to show you how I figure that out. So for example, on the edge of your hat here, every 2 rows there is I call it a bumpier stitch. See, it's a little bump here, and then a smooth one, and a bump, and then a smooth one. So I make a habit of going down through the bumps like that, and then I come up through the bump on the other side. And sometimes I'll grab 2 parts of the stitch. Sometimes I think on this one, I'm just going to grab 1 part. I find that that's enough. Pull it through. And likewise, I'm not going to go through the sort of looser stitch. I'm going to go through the next bump. Okay, so down through the bump, and likewise not the loose stitch, but up through the bump on the other side. Okay, and the nice thing about doing it this way is that you then are meeting one row to the other, one row to the other. You're sort of not getting ahead of yourself on one side or the other. It's sort of keeping the equilibrium, if you will, from one to the other. So on this side now, I'm going to go down through the bump. And there again, sometimes you can go, if you want to go down through the whole part of it, great. I'm just going through the actual bumpy loop at the edge. So there again, you don't need to over sew. I'm not coming up through the loose one. I'm coming up through the tighter bumpy stitch right above it. If I can grab it here. There we go. Okay, so literally that is what you do all the way down the edge for your seam. There's the bump there, and there's the bump there. And literally with sewing like this, you know, sort of sometimes what I'll do is I'll go a little ways, I'll have a look at it. Am I happy with it? Yes, I am. I'll keep going. Sometimes if I feel like I need to go back and tweak a couple stitches, I will. But in general, it all ends up blending in to the hat, and no one is going to see it once it's all in there. But like I say, this is what technically what you would call a whip stitch. We're sort of just doing an angled running stitch that's not overly clunky. It's just a nice simple stitch, and it is simple and quick. And you'll notice on the bottom of your pattern, it says, you know, sew the seam, and then it says something about reversing the seam at the ribbing. That, again, I think I made a bit of a mistake on that. That's only if you were doing a fold back would you need to worry about this. Because we didn't bother doing the fold back this time, we just did our 1.5 inches of rib. I'm just going to carry on with this type of seam all the way to the bottom. And yeah, it's just a nice, tidy, simple seam. As you can see, all the way down the edge here, there's a loose stitch and then a tighter bump, a loose and then a tighter bump. So you can follow that premise all the way to the bottom. And when you get to your ribbing, same thing, you know, every second row is plenty of sewing. I would say anyways, if you felt like it, you know, you could go through every one, but I don't think you'll need to. It's there again, you don't need to over sew. So you can do that all the way to the bottom, and then you can weave your ends in when you're done. And I usually just sort of go to the inside, and I'll give you a demonstration here. Pretend this is my end here. I would just literally take my end and I would run up a few rows with it and pull it through like that. Just hide it and cut, and you're not going to see it once it's all in there. And so yeah, so you end up with a nice top, and yeah, it's pretty simple. And like I say, once you get going on the seam, it almost ends up looking almost like a T2R. Once you get going down that seam with the whip stitch, it ends up blending in and being really super invisible. So yeah, so good job on your hats. I'm glad that everybody's had fun. Sounds like everybody's enjoying it. And yeah, it's a great hat pattern. Like I say, you can use it with any worsted weight yarn, and seems to work good for everybody. Suits just about everybody. So yeah, happy knitting and happy seaming, and we will see you next time. We've got more classes planned soon, so keep your eye on Facebook for info about that. Probably in the next week or two, we're going to tackle a couple of different techniques, and we're going to keep everybody knitting, even though we can't do physical classes right now. We're happy that you're still joining us for this kind of class. So happy knitting, and we'll see you soon.